So, welcome to A March of Ages. I'm Lauren Adams from Robert E. Lee High School, and our guest today is Dr. Fred Gray. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing fine, and it's good to be here with you.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and get started. The topic of integration, can you tell me what it was like back in the day when schools were segregated?
Well, of course, I am a product of Montgomery, Alabama, and a product of the school system. My first 7 grades was at Lovely School, which is on West Jeff Davis. Now I think it's Lamp, or it was Lamp at one time. So it was everything in Montgomery as far as education, as far as church, as far as everything is concerned. In the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s was completely segregated based on race, and the law required it. We accepted it. However, I made a personal commitment during the time I was a student at Alabama State when I recognized how everything segregated was, that those conditions should not exist. I made a commitment that I was going to finish Alabama State, go to law school, not even apply to the University of Alabama, be enrolled in someone's law school, finish law school, come back to Alabama, pass the bar exam, and destroy everything segregated as a lawyer. And that's what I've tried to do for 60 years.
Do you think that this generation of school systems is doing a good job commemorating the civil rights movement?
Well, I think the purpose for desegregating the schools in the first place was so that all the students would have a quality education. I would like to believe that our system now in this county as well as in the whole area that we are producing quality education, but I am sure that we need to improve.
Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how it caused you to go into your profession?
I was born on the west side of town on a little short street named Hercules Street. It's a 2-block street off of Hill Street that runs into the side of St. Jude. I grew up on Jeff Davis and Hill Street, where Lily Baptist Church is now located on the Day Street in the West Jeff Davis area. And I stayed even on Jeff Davis with my mother until after I had finished college, finished law school, and was a lawyer for a year or so and got married, and then moved out to Mobile Heights and lived there until 1966 when I moved to Tuskegee. But we still maintain law offices in Montgomery and in Tuskegee. And of course, the experiences that I've just indicated to you earlier contributed toward me deciding to become a lawyer and to handle cases to come back to Montgomery. And in the case of Carr versus the Montgomery County Board of Education, that's the case that desegregated the schools here in Montgomery.
Can you explain to us what it was like to represent Rosa Parks, Vivian Monroe, and others about the bus boycott?
Well, what you have to remember is that when I represented these people, everything was completely segregated. They all had a problem. In Montgomery, there was a problem of the buses. And of course, Mrs. Parks had a problem, but before Mrs. Parks had a problem, Claudette Carvin, the 15-year-old girl, the student at Booker T. Washington High School, had a problem. Before she had a problem, Joanne Robinson, who was a teacher at Alabama State, had a problem in 1948. So these people had problems, and they needed a lawyer. I was prepared to represent them, did represent them. So I consider them as clients of mine, just like any other client, and was happy to have represented them and happy that it happened to change the conditions and the landscape in this nation and assist in electing a president and in changing the world.
Did you ever think that you would hold a place in office?
Well, it depended at what point in my life we were talking. When I decided to become a lawyer, I wasn't thinking about necessarily holding office. When I decided to move from Montgomery to Tuskegee, because at that time there was a seat, a legislative seat from Macon, Bullock, and Barber County, and there was not that I felt as an African American I had a chance of being elected to. and there was not such a seat in Montgomery at that time. So I moved to Montgomery. One of the reasons was to consider running for the legislature. I did run. I think I won in '66, came out the night, said I won. The next day they said I had lost by the number of votes that I had won by. But I continued to try, and 4 years later I became one of the first 2 blacks to be elected to the Alabama legislature since Reconstruction.
Do you think you would do anything different, like from how you did go to become a lawyer? Do you think you would have stayed in the North?
Don't follow the question.
Do you think that you would have gone to another school for becoming a lawyer? Do you think that your education helped you a lot?
Well, I think that the education that I received in undergraduate school at Alabama State, even though it was a historical black school, we had good teachers who were interested in us and who taught us, and I think it gave me a good basic grounds so that I could compete with students at Western Reserve University in Cleveland, and those were students who had finished undergraduates at all of your major universities across the nation.
Were there any people who might have motivated you and gave you courage to do all of this?
Well, there were several people who motivated me because, number one, Mr. E.D. Nixon, who was Mr. Civil Rights here, was a family friend of ours. He had been president of the State Conference of Branches, president of Montgomery branch of the NAACP. And in those days, and I'm talking about in the 40s and 50s, and even in the 60s, if a person had of color had a problem racially, they would usually see Mr. Nixon. And Mr. Nixon was always looking for lawyers to try to help people. So he encouraged me to be a lawyer. There was a teacher at Alabama State whose name was Pierce, J.E. Pierce. He was a political science teacher who had done a lot of work in the area of voter registration. He recognized the importance of lawyers and encouraged me to be that. But the greatest motivating fact was a self-motivating fact, and that was I saw there was a real problem where segregation was completely prohibiting our people from making constructive contributions, and I decided that the legal profession would be the profession I would select and try to change things as they existed in my hometown. And hopefully, during the last 60 years, we've been able to help change those things.
When Dr. King was assassinated, what were your thoughts?
Well, of course, all of us realize, and all of us who were in the civil rights movement, and particularly in Dr. King's case, because he was the spokesman, he was the one out front. There had been an attempted assassination on his life earlier in New York. So it was not to be unexpected, but we never wanted it to happen. But he recognized it, we all recognized it, we're very sorry that it occurred, but he gave his life for doing the things that he believed in. And I am just happy that I was one of the 2 persons, me and Joanne Robinson, who, when we sat in her living room and planned the Montgomery bus boycott, we recommended to the Montgomery community to select Dr. King to be the spokesman for the persons in the Montgomery bus boycott that introduced him to the nation, to the world, and enabled him to go on to become one of the world's greatest leaders.
During the civil rights movement, children were also involved, and they're very well known for that. Do you think that this generation is doing their part to commemorate those children?
Well, I think, and I told you about Claudette Colvin, and of course you had college students all over the nation who assisted in these various demonstrations which helped to change things. And whether children today are doing that or not, I leave that up to others to make that judgment. But there is no reason why they should not. However, you have 2 whole generation of people who don't know and who did not live during the time of rigid segregation. So they need to be able, and they need to learn about it. And that's why we have formed in Tuskegee, the Tuskegee Human and Civil Rights Multicultural Center. It is a museum for the purpose of showing the contributions made by the three ethnic groups in this country: Native Americans, Americans of European descent, and Americans of African descent. The idea being that if you can see the contributions made by each, then whatever our problems are now, they're not nearly as difficult as the ones we've had. The second mission of that museum in Tuskegee is to show. I served as the lawyer for the men in the infamous Tuskegee syphilis study. The federal government itself was involved in a deadly racial deception in health care. And those men wanted a permanent memorial, and we have that. Then third, in Tuskegee, you have so much rich history and so many precedent-setting cases that people don't know about. For example, we were talking about the Selma-to-Montgomery March, but the first voting rights cases didn't start in Montgomery, nor Selma, nor Birmingham. It started in Macon County, Alabama, where in 1942, African Americans was trying to get the right to vote. Thurgood Marshall and Arthur Shores, the black dean of lawyers up in Birmingham, represented those persons. So young people should be encouraged to take a stand on issues, be sure they're correct in what they're doing, and they don't know. They may be instrumental in helping to do something that may even help to change something in the world.
If there are children or like teens of my age who don't really know how to commemorate or how to press on the topic of race, do you have any advice for them?
Well, of course, what young people have to realize is, one, have to realize that, and you do realize that there are problems. If you see a problem, even a problem in your school, a problem in your home, or a problem in your community that needs to be addressed, whether it's a racial problem or a social problem or economic problem, you need to look at it. And if it is a serious problem, you need to talk to others and see what they think. And then come up with a plan so that you can solve that problem. The Montgomery bus boycott and the Selma-to-Montgomery March and the Civil Rights Movement didn't just happen. People think it did, but it didn't. There were people behind the scene who made the plans. And these are people whose names never appear in the media, their faces never appear on television, but they are the ones who laid the foundation, who made it possible so we can honor Dr. King and Mrs. Parks and these other persons. But young people can play a role. They have the example, but it's left up to them.
Do you have any examples of people who actually helped, the behind-the-scenes people, like people who haven't been mentioned?
Well, of course, you have to be a historian. You have to remember my phase of the civil rights movement. You had various people who were doing various things. Mine was the legal aspect. And I dealt primarily with that. And I let the other people who continued to do the organization and the mobilizing people to work with the young people and work with others and get them involved. They would be in a much better position to answer that question than I would.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you very much for speaking with me.
Good to be with you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I just hope that young people will realize that while we have made some progress, the struggle for equal justice under the law continues, and you have a role to play. And unless you're willing to make a sacrifice and do as I did in my hometown, they can do the same thing. If I could do it with limited resources, with all of the technology and all of the knowledge that you have now, you young people should be able to solve every problem that exists in the world today.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. This has been a March of Ages. My name is Lauren Adams, and thank you for watching.